Hello, all. My name's Josh Gilliland, one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. With me is Gabby Martin, and we are here to discuss the season 1 finale of Loki, the first Marvel show on Disney Plus confirmed to have a second season, and it is fantastic. Gabby, what did you think of the season finale?
I did so much like screaming and just I turned into like a different person when I was watching it. I was watching it with my parents and I think I scared them. I don't think they thought I was okay for a good 50 minutes or however long the show was. So but yeah, it was amazing. I know we talked about last episode that I was really concerned that Kevin Feige had promised that this was fundamentally going to change the MCU as we know it. And I said that I really hoped he took to heart the definition of fundamentally. And they did. They really, really did. And they did it with such perfection. I think that was Loki. That bumped it out for me as probably the top MCU show.
My brother described it as the first, not MCU show because we did have Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter, but the first Disney Plus show that was able to stick the landing. And they were consistent throughout the entire season with great storytelling, and everything was just solid all the way through. And it worked well. It
Yep.
was just a ton of fun. Plus, some of our predictions were accurate. So that's also kind of a nice feeling of like, oh, we guessed right.
Yeah.
And validation for being a lifelong geek who's read comics.
I
And
like though that they fulfilled our expectations, and that a lot of our predictions were right. But they did it in such a way that did not feel predictable. And it was predicted but not predictable. And I think that's what really, as you said, made it stick the landing. Because it could have felt like when Sharon Carter revealed herself to be the power broker, like that fell flat. And this didn't. This totally was blown out of the water. So I'm excited to talk about it.
and and on that note, it's one thing to take themes and stories from comics and then apply them to different characters. And they basically did that with the multiverse war, and we're seeing the aftermath of like the Kang Immortus war. And so one
Mm-hmm.
of the first storylines that I read in the 80s in the Avengers was Kang hunting down and killing all of his variants. This is the aftermath of that. And then finding out that Immortus was, who's a future version of Kang, was able to escape that and was like the good version. And it's like, okay, so we have echoes of that. It's not retelling the same story, but it's a definite theme we've recognized from these characters in Marvel Comics. And like, that's just cool. And it opens the door to an Avengers Forever storyline that they could do. But that gets to some wishes that they could have for future storytelling that we can talk about later. Because I'll put my cards on the table. I don't want to see another everything go to Endgame. Like we've already done that. I would
Yeah.
prefer smaller stories, like the Loki TV series is related to Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, and Spider-Man: No Way Home, and that's the story. And what's going on started in Falcon and the Winter Soldier to the end of Black Widow. That could lead to, say, Secret Invasion.
Mm-hmm.
And so just, and if that then leads to the Captain Marvel sequel, cool. So that way things are like a contained story. It's still long form storytelling, but it's something that could be not get so big it's insane.
Yeah. I don't know. I tend to disagree with you. I really liked, I mean, I am all for the kind of weaving in the storytelling, which I think we did not see as much in the first decade of the MCU. I know there was like, we're I think in like phase 4 now. But what I kind of call the first decade was from, Iron Man to Endgame. I don't think we saw that kind of weaving in and out of storytelling that we're starting to see here, with WandaVision and Loki building to Doctor Strange, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Ant-Man Quantumania. But what I did like about Endgame was that it was this kind of, it was a bookend, right? It was like this closing of this chapter. And now what I like, actually, should say this, I like Endgame more backed up against the Loki series, because I think what the Loki series does for Endgame, it really cements Endgame as a bookend. And it really says like the kind of stakes of the Marvel universe have completely changed. Like, I mean, we talked about this in our first episode, is that, the fact that they had the Infinity Stones just collected there. It's like these stones that were like so important, in the last chapter, if you will, are meaningless now. Like the stakes, the game board has completely changed. And I think we're seeing that with Kang. And I think we're seeing that with the, like we are in a new phase. And I really like that it's this kind of, big, but I mean, if you think about it, where do you go like bookend from here, right? Where do you go without being like too chaotic and too whatever? But maybe that was just nice for Endgame because that was really the start of the Marvel universe. I don't know, but I do like Endgame backed up against the Loki series,
and that's fair. And like this is again person. I just think when I think of Armor Wars, and it's like that doesn't necessarily fit in. And being able to go, here's like 7 stories that go together. Here's 5 that go together, and that gives them more depth and creativity for being able to lean into different comic stories. And when they finally get to Fantastic Four, that could be Galaxus. And in the announcement on Hasbro today that the next Marvel Hasbro Labs that they're doing was a Galaxus that's the like 6-inch figure style. So he's like 36 inches tall or something insane. With 300 points of articulation, and it's $400. And it's just like, dude, it's beautiful. And they put him next to Mr. Fantastic to show the scale. It's like, okay, I'm on board. Like that could be a fun way to have a Fantastic Four movie or introduce a threat. But
I mean, though I should say I would not sleep on Armor Wars, because the fact that Don Cheadle got a Emmy nomination for 96 seconds of screen time in Falcon and the Winter Soldier gives me a lot of hope for Armor Wars. So no, I think that just kind of skyrocketed in the priority list.
Don't get me wrong, I'm excited for it because the 80s story was fantastic. And my hope for that, he becomes Iron Man, like he did in the comic after the Demon in the Bottle series. That because again, Tony was an alcoholic and couldn't function, so Iron Man had to continue, and it was Rhodes. I would like to see him take up the Iron Man mantle and go beyond War Machine, but we'll see if they do something like that. Because it's like, how are you going to honor your friend? You carry the mantle, and you make sure his legacy is protected. But that's an entire, I mean, again, they could relate that, but my theory is not everything has to be related. It's okay if something's standalone, or the shorter, let's do 3 things that are related and we call it a trilogy, and then we're done with that. And then we can focus on, there's another story, just like they do in the comics, because not all the Marvel comics are telling a story that leads to one giant thing. And I don't want to see that all the time. That said, Loki introduces a universal threat that's not a giant CGI battle, and
Yeah.
it was glorious because
It
it's
was so gripping. I mean, we talk about this a lot of, things that if you kind of talked to somebody about it, it would be kind of ridiculous. Mandalorian and those kind of things. If you explained it in kind of very simple terms, people would be like, what? And I think if you said to somebody, this whole episode, season finale, which focuses mainly on a conversation between three individuals and also sets up like an entire new chapter of the MCU, is infinitely gripping and fascinating. Like people would be like, what? Like that's your big bad, this dude that has a conversation with like your two main characters? Really? But it's so fascinating. It's so like you're glued to every word he's saying. It's great.
that, and Jonathan Majors just mopping up the scenery. And it's like, get that man an Emmy nomination for that. What are we going to see in the movies? And the fact that they show in real life that green and purple can go together, that in and of itself is a tough thing to pull off. And the Planet of the Apes ending, where it's like the statue is the Kang uniform that we know without the helmet. So does the helmet go on when he goes through the quantum realm? And it's like, okay, that's just bitching. So well done, guys. Like,
and the fact that we get to see him play multiple versions of the same character, I am so hyped. Like, it's just going to be amazing. Like, no disrespect to Josh Brolin as Thanos, like he did a great job, but this is on another level, like just absolutely another level. I mean, just like the Willy Wonka influences were top notch. I would not have brought that in, but like it worked. It absolutely worked.
And you have an actor who's comfortable. It's like on it, and I'm going to eat an apple the entire time and make it super creepy and weird. So, so let's get into some of the legal issues. And you and I both spotted a couple different ones. And the one that you recognized out of the gate was with Miss Minutes. And is this a plea bargain taking place?
Yeah.
Walk us through your analysis, because I didn't think of this, and it's really ingenious. Help us understand.
I was watching it back again, and we were talking about this offline, but it was hard to kind of actually look at this from a lawyer perspective when you're like geek lens is just like freaking out and that's all you can see. But when she pops up and she's like, I want to offer you or he wants to offer you a deal, I was like, there's something in legal terms that we call a deal. And that's basically what she's offering them is she as his kind of proxy, if you will, is offering them this chance to kind of enter a no contest plea, right? Nolo contendere, and get this, lighter, not even a lighter sentence. It's this alternative, being put back in the timeline. And this is something we see all the time of plea bargainings. We do this to avoid the time and cost of trial. The prosecution saves the time and expense, defendants save the time and expense. And it's important to note that, you say, well, they're at the end of their kind of quest, right? You can offer deals like up until, a jury has submitted a verdict. They happen throughout the process. And there's different types. There's sentence bargaining, and charge bargaining, which sentence bargaining has to do with the lighter sentence or no sentence. Charge is to plead down to a lesser charge. And so what you do is you admit no contest. So you say, I do not contest the charges against me. And it's the same as a guilty plea, but you're not pleading guilty. You're just pleading no contest. And so we see this all the time. So, and what they do is kind of, a deal is offered, and they reject the deal, and they move forward to trial, in a sense, to their confrontation with Kang / He Who Remains. So it is very much like a trial. We could consider the junior prosecutor is offering them a deal on behalf of the senior prosecutor, and they're like, no, thank you, and just keep, going on their way through the process.
I will postulate that He Who Remains is Immortus and not Kang, because his ultimate goal was stability and not universal domination. So he wasn't setting himself up as the king. He was trying to maintain a stable peace without universal Armageddon taking place, or multi-universal Armageddon taking place. And I also wonder, again, this is just nerd, not legal analysis, if there were parallel timelines, but they were all in harmony. Because again, having a female Loki, maybe that timeline, like that it existed and there were variants. Maybe that stuff is happening. And as long as they don't go off their path, that doesn't, that still ends at Thanos killing them, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that's deep level analysis for this, and Lord knows if that's what they did. But that said, great issue spot on that, because it's kind of beyond contract discussions, and again, the plea bargain makes way more sense. The other fact of the time travel that we're about to get into is time's a loop that we see that we saw in Endgame when Tony figures out time travel for the first time. Is time is this ribbon type loop, so it's infinite.
It's an inverted Mobius strip.
Yeah, so it's a strip, and the way that the timeline presents itself when they're in limbo is it circles the castle, and so it's not like they're just seeing it off into infinity. It's this infinite loop around them, which was the warning sign of killing He Who Remains would be an instantaneous reset, with things going to hell instantly. So that was fun. But that raises the issue with what he did for, if we were to put him on for, say, a war crimes trial, was he legally justified in creating the TVA, kidnapping people, pruning timelines, and ultimately weaponizing Goliath to do so in order to stop a multiversal war from taking place that ends with, universal tyranny instead? So, it's like you can be very upset at the fact he exists and what he's doing, and whether or not that's eliminating free will, because you're keeping people, all of reality on guardrails. On the flip side, if he's not doing that, does that open the door for just pure Armageddon and insanity or madness? And so let's talk about, if you were to put him on trial, could he offer the necessity defense for stopping a multiversal war? The rule is the necessity defense may be asserted only by a defendant who has confronted with a crisis which did not permit a selection from among several solutions, some of which did not involve criminal acts. The three-part test is there is no legal alternative to violating the law, the harm to be prevented is imminent, and a direct causal relationship is anticipated to exist between defendant's actions and the avoidance of harm. Well, this gets weird fast because of all that's at stake. And I really want to get your reaction to this, and we might be playing devil's advocate, or we could be on the same side. It's going to get weird. But there's no legal alternative to violating the law. If we're not pruning timelines and keeping reality focused in one direction, Armageddon breaks loose. And when it comes to being imminent, it happens immediately because time, it's not just happening in the 31st century, it affects all of reality. So the imminency issue is immediate because any change would be felt instantly. And this where timey-wimey gets into radical play. A direct causal relationship is reasonably anticipated to exist between the defendant's action and the avoidance of harm. Okay, if we are pruning people and sending them to a horrible death at the end of reality, we keep multiversal Armageddon from happening, and a true military dictator coming in and fundamentally altering all of reality. That sounds justifiable on paper, as ugly as it is. Like we go to a war and we go, yeah, we're gonna have to firebomb a city after they've already attacked. That's what, because there's proportionality in war. You just can't go first strike, we'll nuke them out of the gate to eliminate the problem. That's not how that works. But the time travel factor in this makes it weird, like super weird and complicated. And I love the fact you're smiling. What's your reaction?
I am going to approach this from a English literature perspective, which I like to think informs my career as a lawyer, and that he who remains king of Mortis, whatever title you want to give him, and clearly he's a man of many titles, is an unreliable narrator. And I think everything we know about this quote unquote multiversal war is is unreliable, because he does tell the story that, kind of tracks with what we learned from Miss Minutes in the TVA, which is also problematic because we learn that Miss Minutes is basically his agent. So she could be, telling an unreliable story. But he also says this is where we differ from the dogma. So his story changes from what we learned from Miss Minutes. So the question then becomes, what is the actual truth? So there's none of his other variants there to, not the evil variants, the good variants, that none of them are there to speak to how this happened. Maybe not towards the idea of the legal alternative to violating the law, but if the issue was imminent, if there was possibly some other kind of peace or diplomatic alternative to violating the law, right? Because he says they existed in harmony for many, many years. And then all of a sudden, he says, granted, it was self-congratulatory and it was narcissistic, but it was peace. So it leads me to believe that, how true is this, that, people want power and, that kind of leads to these kind of things. So who knows? And he even says that the job of managing the timeline is for someone young and hungry, who wants this kind of power position, which theoretically is who he was at the beginning. So his unreliable narrator does not lead me to trust his story.
Interesting analysis. One other way to put a spin on this with, like, there's no other less restrictive means is, does that mean you have to wipe out all versions of yourself and that there can be no coexistence? And the answer to that would be Alioth is weaponized to be a genocidal weapon on a universal level, which is what beyond Thanos, because Thanos was about balance. the twisted environmentalist who decides we're just going to kill half the population, as opposed to, well, they're going to wipe us all out if they exist, so we'll just eliminate them. It's like, seriously, all of them? All of them? Are you saying that there's nobody else who just wants peace? That'd be, it's kind of an extreme isolationist worldview, and being able to go, if the United States after World War II said, like, we're just going to solve the problem and flatten all the other countries all at once with one clean blow because we can't trust anybody else. And if they're all radioactive slag, we're fine because we will go on existing, as opposed to thinking there can be a détente, peaceful coexistence. So, I mean, that's the argument against them and saying there's, what do you mean there's no peace? That in order to stop the most dangerous version of yourself, we have to wipe out everything else in reality. So there probably could be a less restrictive means, but the end showed there's a giant statue of Kang, and that one we can be sure is Kang in place of the timekeepers. So yeah, it gets complicated because the proof is already there that all hell broke loose. And Loki missed it by landing. And that raises a big question with the TVA being affected by time, which it appeared they had been immune to it, and now they're not. So that's weird on so many levels on top of it. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack, and Lord knows what the right answer is, because when somebody plays God, it's an uncomfortable thing.
And you really can't speculate. And I think it's interesting the way, what's interesting to me is they're kind of playing with these, like you said, universal kind of stakes, if you will, because, Alioth is kind of a devourer of universes, and Kang is obviously overseeing the entire universe, sacred timeline, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, they're very much kind of analyzing and utilizing this kind of dictator mentality that, he even says, what happened, yes, there's that kind of initial revolt period when if you're around there, you can kind of say, well, let's put the brakes, or let's, argue for peace. But like once that person's been in place, and once they've been in place for, many, many, many years, then the kind of disposition of that dictator goes to the theory of the devil, right? Like what happens when you depose the dictator? You don't know kind of the chaos that awaits you. Like, yeah, it might not be great that nobody has free will and, like he's kind of ruling over everything, but at least we know kind of what we're dealing with. And if we depose him, there's a power vacuum, right? There's, unknowns, there's, everything is kind of in chaos. So I'm glad that they were kind of playing with those very real world, things we've seen with, kind of dictatorships in the real world.
Yeah. And on that note, the fact that our Loki had the self-awareness to go, wait, let's think about this before we do this, because something horrible could come in its place. And Sylvia being like, no, game on, he screwed my existence, I want to kill him. Loki was right to go, let's think about this before we, just make this a personal revenge story. And it was just like, But that's wonderful character development.
Yeah.
For the God of Mischief. And because he's learned to trust, he's reflective, he's has empathy. And it's like, okay, like, you can tell his upbringing wasn't completely horrible, that he, did learn a lot. And this journey, meeting himself, was a good awakening. Now, Sylvie did double down on, no, I have to kill him. And like that's was not healthy nor probably good for all of existence. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Um, yeah. And it's so heartbreaking because she kills him and then she realizes she gained nothing from it. Like, she spent her entire life chasing, bringing this entire kind of establishment down. And to that, I think was a really powerful scene that the fact that they didn't cut that, I think was very powerful.
yeah, she's not standing over him triumphantly with like, "Ha, I got you." It's, "Oh no, I'm still empty inside." And see you soon, because was there an instantaneous shift of, another Kang or Kangs showing up in that moment? So again, maybe it was better to stop and think
Yeah.
before, you know, killing, striking the king.
Yep.
And
Because I think the two options they were given was he was not going to be in charge anymore either way. Either he was going to like casually retire
mm-hmm,
and they were going to take over, but they would still be the sacred timeline, or he died and like all control of it was lost, and that's what would cause the chaos. So he wasn't going to be in charge either way. It's just, again, the idea of, and going back to kind of real world situations where you're deposing like a dictator, that you have to kind of think through, okay, we pull this person out. If we pull the person out, there's a power vacuum. So you have to have steps in place. And he was kind of offering that to them with the retirement option, that the sacred timeline would still exist. They would get to kind of rule it, if you will, the way they wanted to. So yeah, and then they just didn't think that through. So, and now they have a power vacuum. They have a multiverse.
Loki thought it through.
Loki
And,
thought it through.
and the end with him and arriving back at the TVA was so well done, with him seeking out Mobius and and trying to warn them of a very dangerous multiple versions of a very dangerous person are on their way. We have to prepare, and to find out, oh hell, it's already over and I just got here. Like
Yeah.
that raises the question, what's the TVA been doing in the now as new reality or constantly changing reality with Kang? So is there, because their reactions was, what does he want us to do with these 61 new timelines? And as soon as they said I went, this is wrong. They've, like it's the Planet of the Apes ending, and that's what they got. But again, seeing Loki turn into the Paul Revere, the, like the good guy, and in not the same sense as Thor is the good guy. He's different, and in realizing that we can't let this happen, and this is someone who's supposed to be a god, and
Mm-hmm.
realizing, oh, I just what.
And I think what was interesting for me, and again, this is what I say, that I appreciate Endgame so much more as kind of a like back-ended to Loki, um was, Loki's thing, you may conquer the universe but you'll never be a god, right? Because he, even in his final moments, he still held himself above Thanos. um and here, I think he realizes that there's something worse, more powerful. So I don't know what you want to call it, than being a god. And that is being, I think, all knowing, all seeing. And that was something Thanos was not. Thanos was just a conqueror. And this is, a stakes of, existing in all time. And What I also find really cool, and I noticed this, it was like bugging in my brain, as soon as the ending scene, and he comes running up and he says, somebody's, dangerous is coming. It's somebody who, multiple versions of the same person. And I thought of that scene in Thor, when this is the first time we meet Loki, when he and Thor are fighting on the bridge. He duplication casting duplicates himself around Thor, and Thor is left fighting multiple versions of the same villain. And I know that the MCU probably did not think this far out, but to me, I'm like, that became massive foreshadowing of just when that character becomes a hero, that this is the exact same. And the fact that they brought up duplication casting in the show of something different from illusion projection, that this is the exact villain he's going to have to fight, is this person who can create multiple versions of themselves. And he's fighting multiple versions of one person. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I don't think they intended it. But that's my headcanon now. They totally planned that from all the way back in Loki or in Thor.
Happy accident is what it is. Or they went like, hey, this is a good theme, let's run with it. And that too could be a possibility on how we got where they were. But I mean, this is so well written, so well directed, so well acted, because Loki and Sylvie sitting in the chairs, they have very similar body language. And it's like, well done. It's like my brother and I both have similar poses standing. Like we both do like hand on the chin type thing. Like they're doing the way that they held their swords and the way that they both sat, super similar to each other. Sylvie did have better posture, but Loki had probably had more of a rough time recently, so he might. And this isn't the moment that he's been like working for centuries, because she's there to kill him, and Loki's not. You can tell he's definitely thinking, wait. This could go very badly. So let's think four-dimensionally.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, I was excited about, I think I started like screaming / squealing when they opened the elevator doors. And, obviously to me, it was massive trolling on Jonathan Major's part, that he kept saying, oh no, like I'm not involved in Loki. Like, I don't know anything about that show, like whatever. And here he is. And of course, the way the lighting is, that his face is blue, in those initial shots in the purple robes, which is kind of the same as the character of He Who Remains. So the fact that they're kind of merging all these characters into one person, I was freaking out. And then of course, when, we had seen the timeline start to branch, which I think is how, Loki gets kind of knocked into this other timeline. But when it breaks off after she kills him and we see the multiverse, I screamed at the top of my lungs, we have a multiverse, in a very, like, that was normal people language. I don't know how I actually said it. It was like this very inhuman voice. I cannot recreate it. But just the possibilities of a multiverse. And I know we've talked about this, about, not using a multiverse for a multiverse's sake, and as kind of a literary device, but that they use it thoughtfully, that they really use it the way comic books use it, that you can kind of tell different stories with, different people. And I think the fact that Into the Spider-Verse laid a blueprint for how you do a multiversal story that makes sense, that is told well, that both kind of casual viewers and comic book viewers can understand, I think if they follow that, we'll be okay. And I think the possibilities will just be fantastic.
And they've learned what not to do from DC. So there's yeah, that's a different discussion, but don't do that, and because in my view, multiverse from the DC experience is a culmination of bad storytelling for 50 years, why they had to do the Crisis comic book to clean up continuity, compared to the Marvel version with let's just show different possibilities and not just say well, this is happening on Earth 2, that's Earth 17, and just
nobody can keep track. It's like the X-Men series. What timeline are we in? Where are we at in this timeline? Nobody knows. It just exists. It somehow happens all together, and you're just supposed to go along with it.
Yeah, let's not give the fans who are paying money to see this stuff the middle finger. Let's not do that. And Spider-Verse proved it could be done correctly. What If hopefully follows in that vein. And what they
and
do...
it's canon now. What If is going to be canon. So I think that's going to be fantastic. And I actually have seen speculation that it'll actually continue to set up Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, because we have the Multiverse of Madness at this point. We don't know where Doctor Strange is. And I think, based on the trailer footage we've seen, I think What If is going to be our setup to Doctor Strange being oh my God, there's a crisis happening. I was sleeping on the job. I need to, kind of get with it. And we're going to see the result of that. And that makes me even more excited that, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness is just going to jump right in. Set up, groundwork's been laid, we're hitting the ground running. And that's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, it's Loki going, I need one of those green stones, and I'm going to go find the sorcerer. So
yeah,
I'm out.
It's going to be let's go do some magic. And you know what? I'm okay with that.
I need help. I am way over my head. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to 616, and hopefully we can fix this. So yeah. That's... I want my brother and a blanket. I have to figure out what happened when I kissed a version of me. What does that mean? Yeah, there's
going to be so much therapy happening. I really think the accurate meme that I've been seeing floating around is that Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness is going to be kind of the scene from Community, where he walks in holding the pizzas and the whole room is on fire and there's all this chaos. And Doctor Strange is just what's going on? So it's going to be fantastic.
I went to get a pizza, and what happened? Yeah.
That's there's 3 Peter Parkers. Wanda's looking for her kids. Sylvie created a Sylvie/Loki variant, created a multiverse. What is happening?
Yeah, it's... I'm supposed to help protect reality, and that just took a weird turn. Yeah. Gonna see a version of me wearing a blue hood. It's gonna get weird. So yeah, let's game on to all that storytelling that we can see. So yeah, but this was just super good. Like we've talked about the other shows, and we don't need to revisit that. This was everything great about comic book adaptations to a screen. And they did a fantastic job with it. It's I ordered the Loki alligator socks already. It's just, I'll take those, and the Miss Minute ones too. So
I'm ordering the Loki alligator Crocs. I saw those, and I want to have them in my life just to wear around the house, because they look amazing.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. It's going to make you happy. So
as Marie Kondo says, it will spark joy.
Yeah, I also got on Etsy a TVA lapel pin because those look good. So yeah, there's lots of toys and lots that we can talk about at a panel at a con. So like we'll see what this brings for the future, but it's
I mean, the other thing I think that is really great about, that we saw in Loki is what, the MCU has done very well, which is letting the actors, I mean, obviously, actors are nothing without good writing,
mhm.
um, without good storytelling, but they are allowing these actors to breathe life into these characters. And I mean, the fact that Jonathan Majors just took this very unexpected like turn with, He Who Remains, slash King variant, I think is just, it's going to be fantastic to see because it was unexpected. It was a breath of fresh air. Like we have not seen a villain like that. I mean, you could say, well, maybe oh God, what was Jeff Goldblum's character in Ragnarok?
The
Um,
not the collector, that's his brother,
yeah.
which is another thing. But it's the game master, grandmaster or game master.
Grandmaster, yes.
Yeah.
Like you could say, well, he was kind of quirky, but no, he was Jeff Goldblum playing Jeff Goldblum in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
He
Like
went
that's
full
all that
Goldblum.
was. Exactly. But we really have not had a character like this that's kind of, again, that kind of Willy Wonka, like, but with creepy. I mean, if you listen, one of the things that I found really cool was the music. Like, it's very unsettling this entire, throughout that entire scene, the scenes where they're talking, it doesn't feel right. He's very, animated and sing song, and but the music is very, kind of truncated and very kind of, if you isolated it, you would think it was from like a horror movie because it just does not match up with his actions, and it's a very disjointed feeling that you get from him. And the fact that he has this immense power, like, but he's very casual about this power that he has. Um, but again, even Sylvie, being a Loki variant and having many similar qualities to the Loki we know and love, but at the same time being different. Um, so yeah, I think it was just, it's really exceptional, and they really did. I mean, they delivered on fundamentally altering the Marvel universe as we know it. They promised and delivered.
Reminded me of multiple things that they were pulling from. Because you have in this castle, which on some level reminded me of like a Hammer horror movie, or like Castle Dracula and the original Dracula. And there's dust everywhere. So, despite the fact he's been there for eons, it's not like he's automated it. It's not sparkling clean. There are shattered statues. There are things that are a mess. Why did that happen? Was there a fight? Was that part of knocking out other variants of himself? How long has he been alone? Think of people throughout COVID who spent a little too much time alone. And when they get to see someone, they're hugging strangers. Like he's that level of weird and shut in. And so is Miss Minutes his only company? So there's that factor as well with his character. That's just so brilliant. I would Majors would probably be fun to hang out with at a barbecue or game night. He seems like a really interesting dude. And when you compare his performance in Lovecraft Country to this, it's like, oh, that man has chops. He
Yep.
can do a variety. He can do a lot. He's not a one-trick pony. No, no, there's a lot to this man, and that's just neat. I mean, the caliber of Hiddleston, Majors, and was it DeMilo or D? Why am I forgetting Sophie's last name?
DiMartino.
DiMartino. Those are all high quality actors.
Yeah.
And they're all doing, well, he's definitely doing a supervillain speech for like 25 minutes, which we haven't seen before. And it breaks so many norms that we've seen with the supervillain. There was a protracted issue with supervillains just being bad for the sake of being bad. You know, like Red Skull is a Nazi, hell-bent on purifying the world in his image and then ruling what's left over. You know, Yellow Jacket, again, just wants to, bad arms dealer, bad for the sake of being bad, you know, and so you can't have everyone be John the Bastard. So you know, so you get Thanos, which is kind of a spin on, I just want to blow everything up, but it's spun on, I'm going to blow up half of everything and the rest will be sustainable. But there's going to be a lot of culling in the meantime. Like, that's bad. Like, the most original villain out of Marvel, in my opinion, was Wilson Fisk in Daredevil, who was more aggressive urban renewal and redevelopment to make the world nice for white people, and was not shy and going like, we'll just blow up parts of the city and everything's going to be nice for Vanessa and people like her who deserve to have nice things. He was different. It wasn't ruling for the sake of ruling. Like in Loki and Avengers was just blow the place up for just cause, you know, having a temper tantrum. You know, think of Iron Man. It's just Stain was about acquiring power and making money. So again, they just.
I mean, to me, I saw the shift more with Black Panther and Killmonger. I think for me that, I mean, you know, because, you know, you could point to kind of Loki as this kind of transformative villain over the course of, you know, that he goes from villain to anti-hero to hero. But I think he was always meant to kind of have this much larger arc in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because he is such kind of a foil and kind of a touchstone for Thor. So they really have to act kind of in concert to each other. Whereas as Killmonger, from the beginning, he's a character that you can, I mean, like, for me, the fact that, I mean, obviously we see young Killmonger in the flashbacks, but the fact that his opening scene is at a museum and he's kind of, you know, talking about how these artifacts were stolen, and that it kind of shifts of like, well, he's not the bad guy. Like, he's reclaiming these artifacts. You know, it's the museum that stole them in the first place. And it's this really kind of, you know, even at the end, like, he has the most powerful line, I think, in all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, when he says, you know, bury me in the ocean with, you know, my brothers and sisters who didn't, you know, my ancestors who knew that dying in the sea was better than dying in chains. Like, that's, you know, and so you identify with him throughout his entire journey as a villain. Obviously you're rooting for T'Challa more, but like, he's also, you can understand why he does the things he does. And I don't think he ever goes about them in a very, you know, super duper evil way. So that to me was the shift. And I think I like seeing those villains who are not completely evil, that you can identify with them, because that's a lot of our villains in real life, that, you know, but for, you know, a choice that they made, but for circumstances, but, you know, but for anything, or even the way society categorizes them, they're considered, you know, villains. So I think that's a much more comprehensive and detailed way of storytelling. Obviously, the kind of John the Bastard villains have a place in time. But I think hopefully we'll see more of the kind of complex villains in this new saga of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, they solve the villain problem. is the best way to describe it. We'll find complex villains, and I do agree with Killmonger is a good line of demarcation in the movies, and because he was complex, there was a lot to him, and he's not bad for the sake of being bad. Or Ghost and Ant-Man and the Wasp, just wanted medical treatment. That's
fighting the healthcare system.
Yeah, Grant,
totally relatable. The only thing that would have made her more relatable as a villain is if they had showed her on hold with an insurance representative and trying to get her claims approved. That would have made her super relatable. That was the only thing missing. That little deleted scene should have had her on hold with insurance.
Yeah, and it's this is way beyond a single payer system for what she needed for treatment to not be phasing in and out of reality. But again, there was a complex character. So they've gotten better at it. And because not everyone can be, I'm just here to burn the world down. That's just, no. Here's Immortus, because I think that's probably a better description than, say, Ramatut or Kang, that he just wanted peace and stability, or else all hell would break loose. It's okay, and that's not great, but we can at least understand it, as opposed to, well, we figured if we just kill half the population, everything would be fine. He's not thinking in those terms. He's telling Sylvie to grow up. And it's whoa. So he has a point. I'm not saying that there aren't other alternatives, but you can definitely see okay, if he's billions of years old, did he try other things in that amount of time that didn't work out? We don't know.
He's definitely defensible.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be a successful defense, but he does have more than a frivolous defense. I will say that for him.
Yeah, because you can look at virtually any other villain in the MCU and go, nope, no. Oh, he's different. It's a very different vibe to him. Plus his storytelling method, that was just kind of neat, seeing all the little figures and how he did everything. So again, that liquid metal. But now, was there another?
Which looks a little bit like vibranium, just a little bit.
I wonder if it was from Wakanda.
I would, on storytelling, I hope that they don't make that. I hope that they don't make that a point, because then it's the only Black people in the Marvel universe come from Wakanda. And that would be terrible.
That would be weird.
That would be weird. The only other Black character in Star Wars has to be related to one of the other ones because, we don't have an entire galaxy. But yeah, it was neat. And his wink at the end, it not only had very, Willy Wonka, vibes, but also it was reminiscent of Heath Ledger's Joker, this kind of crazed, unstable, kind of crazed person, and I think that will only increase when we see, if this was kind of the innocent, neutral, um, you know, just wants to keep the timeline at peace, what are the other ones going to look like? What is, the actual Kang the Conqueror going to look like and act like? And I think that's going to be fascinating to see.
Agreed, because there's so many ways that they could go. The comics touched on a future where Kang and Ultron were at war and recruiting characters from across time to be in their army. You there were other spins on time travel as well, where Doom pulled heroes from the past, different points in the past, to help fight a battle in the future, and including Jane Foster Thor and Thor under the Death Curse. So yeah, so like just when you deal with time travel, you can get into some really funky things, and let's see if they go there or not. And because Kang is a quintessential Avengers villain, and like it's like okay, I'm on board with this. And I'm fine if they just again like Ant-Man versus Kang. I initially had doubts about that, but now after seeing Jonathan Majors, him and Paul Rudd chewing up scenery together sounds like time well spent. So bring that.
I don't know. I mean, to me, I think they need something of a bit of gravitas. To me, it might get a little too hokey. I mean, you would have visit Michael Douglas and Michelle Pfeiffer in there somehow. But I don't know. I'm not on board the Ant-Man Quantumania train yet. I need more information about it. And maybe we'll get that with Spider-Man Far From Home and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But yeah, I think what we're going to see is the Marvel Studios really playing into the kind of craziness that comic books are. I think they've seen that they can sell pretty much anything. And I think, the fact that they're willing to lean fully into that, I think is going to be pretty cool to see. To me, from a practical kind of messaging perspective, communications perspective, I think may depend also on the success of What If, to see how many people kind of buy into that. Different versions of different characters. But I think given the hype that's already surrounding the trailer for What If, this is not going to be kind of a quiet Marvel show, even though it's animated. I think, there's a lot of excitement around it, and I think it will do really well. If for no other reason that people want to see the last, performance of Chadwick Boseman in the MCU, that's going to carry it. But I think how crazy they go may depend on the reception of What If, and if people are really on board with zombie versions of characters, and different Peggy Carter as Captain Britain, and different iterations of that, how on board they are. And then we'll see. But we're definitely going to get Doctor Strange and Spider-Man No Way Home. And I think there's a lot of storytelling possibilities with this multiverse, which is why I'm so excited.
Yeah, there's no shortage of content to look forward to, and I don't know what the future will hold. That's the beauty of this. And if you told the version of me in 1986 that there was going to be a deep bench of these movies and TV shows that would be good, I would not have believed you. Well, I might have, but I would have been very shocked. It's seriously, we're not dealing with Roger Corman horror of Fantastic Four crap. Seriously, good. Because I remember the weird, funky 1970s Doctor Strange movie, it's not good. So like it's I saw horrible things. The Spider-Man in LA where he's just driving around because LA doesn't have buildings like New York, like that sort of thing.
No, it really is like it's this kind of golden age of cinematic, comic book movies and television. And I think, we've said this multiple times, but I think Marvel really has kind of, a line and an example of what not to do from DC. And, the fact that DC just keeps sticking their foot in their mouth, just crapping on things and digging the hole deeper, both on the cinematic universe and the television universe, I think is kind of a good, they can always say, well, let's not do this. Let's be better than this. And I think if they're even remotely better, and I think to me, they pay attention to feedback, but in a constructive way. And hopefully we don't get a disaster like Falcon and the Winter Soldier again.
There's no neck snapping. So there's that. And and there's like no weird like footage of Jason Momoa like going into waves that seems just super creepy and like kind of stalking.
There's no CGI that seems worse than the CGI on Smallville, which aired in the early 2000s.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. And
sorry, DC fans. I am a DC fan, and it is hard times.
That's painful, but less is more. So like less CGI, which is why I don't want to see another Endgame battle. It's like I don't want to see 50 characters at once.
Yeah, I don't think they could recreate that. Like, I think that was years in the making, and to do it again would be not just cheap, but I think it would cheapen that. And it would become the kind of CW Arrowverse crossover that's now absolutely ridiculous. Like that, you have to learn where the line is. And I think, the fact that Marvel is, not only kind of seemingly watching what DC is doing, but the fact that they're kind of being intentional about their storytelling, who they hire for different films to put different films on. I mean, the exciting news that I saw the other day is that they hired a Black female writer to write for Blade. So that is exciting. Like, that's awesome. And, I think they're going to have missteps. America Chavez. But I think overall they're doing pretty okay. Never forgive, never forget. And the movie hasn't even come out yet. So hopefully it'll be good times for Marvel. Obviously you can't be perfect every time, but
no, but they have a pretty good batting average. When the misfires can be counted on one hand as opposed to like 90% of the films. It's like, seriously, that was the plan. Okay. This is creative. Like we saw Judge Renslayer leave in this. She missed minutes through or acting as Immortus's or He Who Remains agent, downloaded files that would be useful to her. What were those files? How will we see her? What's the quest for free will? Are there now multiple versions of the TVA? Like what are we going to? And the fact that we get season 2 and we have movies in between. What's going to happen? Like there's so much to look forward with this. And this isn't there are a couple big legal issues and a couple blog posts that we can glean from this. It's just different. And I look forward to what we're going to be writing and get to see in the months ahead, because we live in a golden age where the toys are good. I have an FX mole mirror on the wall. Seriously, like, told me that in 1990, I would say you were lying. So, so here we are. So with that, any other thoughts as we look forward to the future?
I am still every single day hyped for Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, which I know we are probably, actually, I should say 99% sure you and I are going to have a podcast to discuss Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness when it comes out. And I am so hyped. And I am hyped for the Spider-Man trailer. I think clearly they were holding it back for a reason. And obviously, I don't expect it until like maybe Sunday at the earliest, because they kind of wait for things to kind of become spoiler free, if you will, to give people time to watch. But hopefully it'll drop either Sunday, Monday, or maybe at San Diego Comic-Con at home. But hopefully a trailer is coming, because that's going to be exciting. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we're getting Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield.
Okay, that would, I do want that. My money is on Comic-Con at home, because that seems to be a good time to release it. There's a lot happening, and it's a pop culture focal point. Tobey Maguire was an outstanding Spider-Man who was the gold standard for comic book movies during the end of the wilderness period. And Garfield was competent. I don't mean to be trite, but there could have been better writing with his movies.
Yeah, it was meh. It was meh. It was a good holdover. Between Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland. That was Andrew Garfield. It was a holdover.
And Holland, I think, is the best out of all of them.
For sure.
But it took a lot to unseat Tobey Maguire. So there's that.
It took being younger to unseat Tobey Maguire. It took actually looking like a high school student to unseat Tobey Maguire. Because come on, that kid did not look like a high schooler at all.
No, and
at any point.
No, and the fact that they chickened out with doing the comic accurate Green Goblin outfit, because showing the screen test for that is like, that would have been terrifying, and everything that we would have wanted in that character on screen, as opposed to the Iron Man-esque type out, which again would have made sense for the first part, but then if he had creeped it out, that would have made sense. But again, we wouldn't be where we are right now without him. And like in that version of Spider-Man, his life sucked. Like, it's Uncle Ben dies, the girl he likes is ignoring him, and then he has to lie to her. It's just like, no, you don't want to be with. No, I just love you as a friend. It's very hard for a male to say that out loud. So because most women would know we're lying, but like, again, his bike is beaten up, and like he's thought he lost the. It's like, just like you watch, it's like, God, his life sucked, and it's like, and that was being a hero. Just, I'm trying to do the right thing, and everything is, I'm hungry and can't pay rent, and yeah. So anyway, with that, hopefully we get to see him again, because that would be nice vindication. So, yep. So with that, everyone, this has been a fun journey. We'll be doing more Bad Batch because we're still watching that. I'm not sure when we'll be back for more Marvel, but set the clock. And until then, everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay geeky. Take care.